The sun hung high in the sky, casting a golden glow over the small town of Willowbrook. It was one of those crisp, clear mornings where the air felt fresh, and the world seemed full of possibilities. The streets were alive with the hum of activity, people bustling to work, children laughing on their way to school, and shopkeepers opening their doors for the day. But in the midst of this ordinary scene, something extraordinary was about to unfold. At the edge of town stood a car dealership, gleaming under the sunlight. Its large glass windows reflected the rows of shiny new cars, each one polished to perfection. The sign above the entrance read, Willowbrook Motors, and beneath it, a group of young salesmen lounged near the entrance, chatting and laughing. They were dressed in sharp suits, their confidence radiating as they prepared for another day of selling dreams on wheels. Among them was Jake, the self-proclaimed star salesman. He had a knack for closing deals and a charm that could disarm even the most skeptical customers. But Jake also had a habit of underestimating people, especially those who didn't fit his idea of a big spender. And today, his arrogance was about to be put to the test. As the clock struck 10 a.m., an elderly man shuffled into the dealership. He was dressed in a simple, worn-out coat and a pair of scuffed shoes. His silver hair was neatly combed, and his eyes held a quiet wisdom, but his appearance was far from impressive. The salesman glanced at him, exchanged smirks, and quickly dismissed him as just another time waster. Jake, eager to entertain his colleagues, decided to have a little fun. He approached the man with an exaggerated smile. "Good morning, sir. Welcome to Willowbrook Motors. How can I assist you today?" His tone was polite, but his eyes betrayed his amusement. The man looked around slowly, taking in the rows of cars. "I'm just browsing," he said softly, his voice carrying a hint of nostalgia. Jake's grin widened. "Of course, take your time. Let me know if you need help picking out a bicycle." The other salesman stifled laughter, clearly enjoying the joke. The man didn't react to the jab. Instead, he continued to walk through the showroom, occasionally stopping to examine a car more closely. Jake followed him at a distance, making sarcastic comments under his breath to his colleagues. The man seemed oblivious, or perhaps he simply chose to ignore them. After about 20 minutes, the man approached Jake. "I'd like to test drive that one," he said, pointing to the most expensive car on the lot. A sleek, black luxury sedan with a price tag that could make anyone's eyes water. Jake raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. "That's our top-of-the-line model, sir. Are you sure you can handle it?" The man nodded calmly. "I'm sure." Shrugging, Jake fetched the keys, still convinced this was a waste of time. He handed them over and watched as the man slid into the driver's seat with surprising ease. The engine purred to life, and the car glided out of the dealership with the man behind the wheel. The salesman gathered at the entrance, watching the car disappear down the road. "Think he'll bring it back in one piece?" one of them joked. "Who cares? He's probably just joyriding," Jake replied, rolling his eyes. But as the minutes ticked by, the atmosphere in the dealership began to shift. The man returned exactly 30 minutes later, parking the car with precision and stepping out with a satisfied smile. He handed the keys back to Jake and said, "I'll take it." Jake blinked, stunned. "Excuse me?" "I said I'll take it. The car." "I'll buy it," the man repeated, his tone firm. The other salesmen exchanged uneasy glances. Jake, recovering from his shock, forced a smile. "That's wonderful, sir. Let's get the paperwork started." As they sat down in Jake's office, the man pulled out a checkbook and began writing. Jake's eyes nearly popped out of his head when he saw the amount, the full price of the car, paid in one lump sum. He stammered, "Sir, I didn't catch your name earlier." The man looked up, his eyes twinkling with amusement. "Henry Whitaker." Jake's blood ran cold. Henry Whitaker. The name was familiar to anyone who followed business news. He was the reclusive billionaire who had built an empire from the ground up, known for his humility and his knack for staying out of the spotlight. Jake's mind raced as he realized the gravity of his mistake. Before Jake could say anything, Henry leaned back in his chair and said, "You know, young man, I've been looking for a new investment. This dealership has potential, but it's clear that the staff could use some retraining." Jake's mouth went dry. "What are you saying, sir?" Henry smiled. "I'm saying I just bought this dealership. Effective immediately. I'm your new boss." The room fell silent. Jake's colleagues, who had been eavesdropping from the doorway, looked as though they'd been struck by lightning. Henry stood up, his presence commanding respect. "I'll be making some changes around here, starting with a focus on treating every customer with dignity. regardless of how they look or what they wear. Jake could only nod, his earlier arrogance replaced by a sinking feeling of regret. Henry extended his hand, and Jake shook it, his grip weak. As Henry walked out of the office, he paused and turned back. "Oh, and Jake? You're fired." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Jake slumped in his chair, his mind reeling. The other salesmen scattered, suddenly very busy with their work. Henry, meanwhile, strolled through the dealership with a sense of purpose, already envisioning the changes he would make. By the end of the day, the news had spread like wildfire. Willowbrook Motors had a new owner, and the man they had mocked was now their boss. The town buzzed with the story, and the dealership's reputation began to shift. Under Henry's leadership, it became a place where everyone was treated with respect, and where the value of a person was never judged by their appearance. As for Jake, he learned a hard lesson that day, one he would carry with him for the rest of his life. And Henry? He drove off in his new car, a quiet smile on his face, knowing he had turned a moment of disrespect into an opportunity for change. The following morning, the sun rose over Willowbrook with a renewed sense of anticipation. The town, still abuzz with the news of Henry Whitaker's takeover of the dealership, seemed to hum with curiosity. What would the billionaire do next? How would he transform the place that had once dismissed him so casually? Henry arrived at the dealership early, dressed in the same modest coat and scuffed shoes as the day before. The salesman, now acutely aware of who he was, greeted him with nervous smiles and overly polite nods. Henry acknowledged them with a simple, "Good morning," before making his way to the office. His presence was calm but commanding, and the atmosphere in the dealership shifted palpably. The first order of business was a staff meeting. Henry gathered everyone in the showroom, standing in front of a gleaming red convertible. The salesman fidgeted, unsure of what to expect. Jake, now unemployed, was conspicuously absent, but his absence was a stark reminder of the consequences of arrogance. Henry began, his voice steady and clear. "I'm sure you're all wondering why I've chosen to invest in this dealership. The truth is, I see potential here, but potential means nothing without the right values. Yesterday, I was treated as less than a person because of how I looked. That ends today." He paused, letting his words sink in. "From now on, this dealership will operate on 3 principles: respect, integrity, and excellence. Every customer who walks through those doors will be treated with dignity, regardless of their appearance or background. If you can't abide by that, you're welcome to leave now." No one moved. The salesman exchanged uneasy glances, but no one dared to speak. Henry nodded, satisfied. "Good. Now let's talk about changes." Over the next few hours, Henry outlined his vision for Willowbrook Motors. He introduced new training programs focused on customer service, announced plans to expand the inventory to include more affordable options, and even proposed a community outreach initiative to provide free car maintenance for low-income families. The salesman listened intently, some taking notes, others simply trying to process the whirlwind of changes. But Henry wasn't done. He had one more surprise up his sleeve. "I've also decided to bring in a new manager to help implement these changes," he said. "Someone with fresh ideas and a proven track record." The door to the showroom opened, and in walked a woman in her early 30s, dressed in a sharp business suit. Her confidence was evident as she strode to the front of the room. Henry introduced her. "This is Clara Martinez. She's been in the automotive industry for over a decade and has successfully turned around several struggling dealerships. She'll be taking over day-to-day operations, effective immediately." Clara smiled warmly at the group. "I'm excited to work with all of you. Together, we're going to make Willowbrook Motors the best dealership in the region." The salesmen murmured their greetings, some more enthusiastic than others. Clara's presence was a clear signal that Henry meant business, and the old ways of doing things were over. As the days turned into weeks, the dealership began to transform. Clara's leadership was firm but fair, and her innovative ideas quickly gained traction. The salesmen, once dismissive and cocky, found themselves learning new skills and adopting a more customer-centric approach. The changes weren't always easy, but the results spoke for themselves. Sales began to climb, and the dealership's reputation improved steadily. Henry, meanwhile, remained a quiet but influential presence. He often visited the dealership not as a boss but as a mentor. He took the time to speak with the staff, offering advice and encouragement. His humility and wisdom earned him the respect of everyone he encountered. One afternoon, as Henry was walking through the service bay, He noticed a young mechanic struggling with a stubborn engine. The mechanic, a wiry man in his early 20s, looked frustrated and on the verge of giving up. Henry approached him. "Need a hand?" The mechanic looked up, surprised. Yeah, this thing just won't cooperate." Henry rolled up his sleeves and leaned in. "Let me take a look." Together, they worked on the engine, Henry sharing tips and tricks he'd learned over the years. Within an hour, the engine roared to life. The mechanic grinned. "Thanks, Mr. Whitaker. I didn't know you knew so much about cars." Henry chuckled. "I didn't always have the money to pay someone else to fix them. You learn a thing or two when you have to do it yourself." The mechanic nodded, a newfound respect in his eyes. "Well, I'm glad you're here." Henry clapped him on the shoulder. "So am I." As the weeks turned into months, the dealership became a cornerstone of the community. Henry's outreach programs made a tangible difference, and the staff took pride in their work. The once dismissive salesman now greeted every customer with genuine warmth, and the dealership's success became a source of pride for the entire town. But Henry's impact extended beyond the dealership. His story spread, inspiring others to look beyond appearances and treat everyone with kindness and respect. He became a symbol of humility and integrity, a reminder that true success is measured not by wealth but by the lives we touch. One evening, as the sun set over Willowbrook, Henry stood outside the dealership, watching the golden light reflect off the rows of cars. Clara joined him, a satisfied smile on her face. "You've done something incredible here, Henry." He shook his head. "We've done something incredible. This was a team effort." Clara nodded, her respect for him evident. "What's next for you?" Henry thought for a moment, his gaze distant. "I'm not sure, but I know there's more work to be done. More people to help, more lives to change." Clara smiled. "Wherever you go, I have no doubt you'll make a difference." Henry turned to her, his eyes filled with quiet determination. "That's the plan." As they walked back inside, the dealership buzzed with activity, a testament to the power of second chances and the importance of treating everyone with dignity. And Henry Whitaker, the man who had once been mocked, stood at the heart of it all, a beacon of hope and a reminder that it's never too late to make a change. As the months rolled on, Willowbrook Motors became more than just a successful dealership. It became a symbol of transformation, not just for the business itself, but for the people who worked there and the community it served. Henry Whitaker's influence was felt in every corner of the town, and his story continued to inspire those who heard it. One crisp autumn afternoon, Henry received an unexpected visitor at the dealership. A young man, no older than 25, walked in hesitantly, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. He looked around nervously before approaching Clara, who was overseeing the showroom floor. "Excuse me," the young man said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Is Mr. Whitaker here?" Clara studied him for a moment, noting the mix of anxiety and determination in his eyes. "He is. Can I tell him who's asking?" The young man hesitated, then said, "My name's Daniel. I need to talk to him." Clara nodded and led Daniel to Henry's office. Henry was seated at his desk, reviewing financial reports, but he looked up with a warm smile when they entered. "Clara, Daniel," he said, gesturing for them to sit. "What can I do for you?" Daniel fidgeted in his seat, clearly struggling to find the right words. Finally, he took a deep breath and said, "Mr. Whitaker, I heard about what you did here, how you turned this place around, and I was wondering if you could help me." Henry leaned forward, his expression kind but curious. "Go on." Daniel's story spilled out in a rush. He had grown up in a rough part of town, his family struggling to make ends meet. He dropped out of school to help support them, working odd jobs wherever he could. But he had always dreamed of something more, a chance to build a better life for himself and his family. When he heard about Henry's transformation of the dealership, he saw a glimmer of hope. "I don't have much," Daniel admitted, his voice trembling, "but I'm willing to work hard. I just need someone to give me a chance." Henry listened intently, his eyes softening with empathy. When Daniel finished, Henry sat back in his chair, silent for a moment. Then he said, "Daniel, do you know what the most valuable currency in the world is?" Daniel shook his head, confused. "No, sir." "Opportunity," Henry said. "And it's something I believe in giving freely. You've got the drive, and that's half the battle. The other half is having someone believe in you. Consider this your opportunity." Daniel's eyes widened. "You mean?" Henry smiled. "Starting tomorrow, you'll join our team as an apprentice. We'll teach you everything you need to know, sales, customer service, even the basics of car maintenance. If you're willing to put in the work, we'll help you build the future you've been dreaming of. Tears welled up in Daniel's eyes, but he quickly blinked them away. Thank you, Mr. Whitaker. I won't let you down. Henry stood and extended his hand. I know you won't. Over the next few months, Daniel proved himself to be a quick learner and a hard worker. He absorbed every lesson, asked questions, and never shied away from a challenge. The other employees, inspired by Henry's example, welcomed him with open arms and offered their support. Daniel's confidence grew, and with it, his dreams began to take shape. One evening, as the dealership was closing, Henry found Daniel in the service bay, polishing a car that had just been repaired. Henry leaned against the doorframe, watching him for a moment before speaking. You've come a long way, Daniel. Daniel looked up, surprised. Thanks, Mr. Whitaker. I couldn't have done it without you. Henry shook his head. You did the work. I just gave you the opportunity. Remember, success isn't about where you start. It's about where you're willing to go. Daniel nodded, a thoughtful expression on his face. I've been thinking. Someday, I'd like to open my own business. Maybe even a dealership like this one. Henry's eyes sparkled with pride. That's a fine goal. And when you're ready, I'll be there to help you make it happen. As the years passed, Henry's legacy continued to grow. Willowbrook Motors thrived under Clara's leadership, and the dealership became a model for others in the industry. Henry himself remained a guiding force, not just in the business but in the community. He funded scholarships, supported local charities, and mentored countless young people like Daniel, helping them find their footing in the world. Eventually, the time came for Henry to step back. He had achieved what he set out to do, not just to build a successful business, but to create a place where people were valued and dreams were nurtured. At his retirement party, the entire town gathered to celebrate him. Employees, customers, and friends shared stories of how Henry had touched their lives, each one a testament to his kindness and vision. When it was Henry's turn to speak, he stood before the crowd, his voice steady but filled with emotion. Life is a series of moments, he said, some big, some small, but it's what we do with those moments that defines us. I've been fortunate to have many opportunities in my life, and my greatest joy has been sharing those opportunities with others. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of your stories. The crowd erupted into applause, and as Henry looked out at the sea of faces, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He had come to Willowbrook as a stranger, dismissed and underestimated. But through his actions, he had shown that true worth is measured not by appearances, but by the impact we have on the world around us. As the party wound down, Daniel approached Henry, now a confident young man with a thriving business of his own. Mr. Whitaker, he said, I just wanted to say thank you for everything. Henry smiled, placing a hand on Daniel's shoulder. You did the hard work, Daniel. I just gave you a push. Remember, the best way to thank me is to keep paying it forward. Daniel nodded, his eyes shining with determination. I will. Promise. And with that, Henry Whitaker's story came full circle. He had turned a moment of disrespect into a lifetime of opportunity, not just for himself, but for everyone he touched. As he walked into the sunset, he knew that his legacy would live on. Not in the cars he sold or the money he made, but in the lives he had changed and the hope he had inspired. What an incredible journey, right? Henry Whitaker's story is a powerful reminder that kindness, humility, and second chances can transform lives in ways we never expect. It makes you think, how often do we judge others based on appearances, only to realize later how wrong we were? Henry's legacy wasn't just about building a successful business. It was about creating a community where everyone has the opportunity to thrive. So, I want to hear from you. What did you think of Henry's story? Have you ever experienced a moment where someone gave you a chance when no one else would? Or maybe you've been in a position to help someone else achieve their dreams. Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your stories and reflections. And if you enjoyed this tale of transformation and inspiration, don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel for more heartwarming stories, thought-provoking content, and lessons that remind us of the power of empathy and opportunity. Hit that subscribe button and join our growing community of dreamers and doers. Together, we can keep spreading stories that matter. See you in the next video.